Hey guys, how you going? I'm going to try making this video again because I filmed it a couple of times, but what I want to try and say kind of gets convoluted and very hard to follow. So I'm going to try and make it very succinct and very clear to follow. This week we're talking about gold stars, which according to Nikki's definition is someone who has not had sex with someone of the opposite sex. I disagree with the meaning, the star itself, everything to do with it. And hopefully I can now explain why. So I want to pull our channel up on some of our terminology. My understanding, and I take this from a little bit of training that I've had in different roles, and hopefully I'm saying this from a place of trying to educate others as well. When we're talking about topics like this, we often use terminology such as same-sex attracted. We don't mean same-sex attracted. So when we're talking about identity, there are three main areas of identity that I want to touch on. There is sex, there is gender, and there is sexuality. You might have used these three terms used quite often, sometimes sex and gender interchangeably. For example, if I was to ask you what your gender is right now, you may say male or female. If I was to ask you what your sex was, you may say, I just said male and female. And for most people, or for a lot of people at least, that would be the case. But it's not always the case, and we need to keep that in mind. Your sex, and these are these are the meanings that I have been told by a few different sources, not to say that they can't be changed or that they are completely correct. You know, whoever is working or learning in these fields, there's always more to learn. Sex is your biological, I guess, what you're born with, or your physiological stuff. So you might be born a female or a male or intersex, or I'm not too sure, there may be something else as well. Your gender is then what you choose to identify as. So you can be born a male and you can identify as a male. That's called cisgendered. When your sex and your gender match up, that's cisgendered. If you're born a male, but you identify as a female, then you are transgendered. So, for example, or opposite I should say. So you're born a female, identify as a male, born intersex, identify as one or the other, male or female. And I'm going to touch on something else later on, but let's go with that definition for now. It gets a little bit more convoluted than that. So that's sex and gender, and then sexuality is more about who you're attracted to. Generally, I like to think of sexuality being what gender you're attracted to. So for example, a gay cisgendered man would be attracted to male identifying people. So that is, and this again is completely open to interpretation, and I could be completely wrong here, but you know, could a gay man be attracted to someone who is biologically female but identifies as a male? Absolutely they can. Would they act on it? I think that's up to the individual person. I would hope that they would, and I've done videos before on this channel about my idea of sexuality, and I think Nikki agrees with me that, you know, the view of it should be about the person, not their sex or their gender or their sexuality, but that's something different. Anyway, so that's sex, that's born with it, gender, what you identify as, and sexuality, who you're attracted to. The problem that I have with the gold star is that it's talking about, well, first of all, the definition we're using is had sex with the opposite sex. Well, you're having sex with someone who identifies as something, so you're having sex with the opposite gender. But the reason I completely disagree with the gold star is very similar to Nikki's yesterday. I think it does do two things. Something that Nikki mentioned yesterday, I think it reinforces to us the idea of good gay, bad gay, or lesbian, or bi, or whatever, but it definitely reinforces the fact that sexuality is set in stone, that it's not transitional and that it's not fluid, and I completely disagree with that. I believe that just because you identify as something now doesn't mean that you can't change. For any reason, you know, we don't know if it's something that's biological, we don't know if it's something that's psychological, environment, and no matter what it is, you're always subject to change. I don't personally like definitives, and saying I will always be whatever sexuality, that's being extremely restrictive on yourself, and closing off other opportunities. Who's to say that in 30 years' time you're not going to find the most amazing person who doesn't conform to whatever you're currently saying that you're attracted to, are you going to close that off completely? And this is why I hate the gold star, because it's reinforcing that you can't do that, and I don't like it. The second reason why I don't like the gold star is because it's talking about opposite sex. Sexes, well, and I will now use the correct terminology, or at least what I consider correct, genders. Genders don't have opposites. At the moment, we are using something called a gender binary. The idea that there is male and there is female, and that's it. In that case, yes, there are opposites. Female is opposite to male. But that is because there are two, and it's a binary. And it is a very, very horrible binary, and it is very restrictive, and it enforces a lot of ideas that have been carried over from past generations, from misogynistic and generations, that don't apply to today and that we need to get rid of. There are not just two genders. There is genderqueer and ambiguous. There are lots and lots of different ones. And it's a huge fight for someone who does not identify as male, or someone who does not identify as female, or someone who transitions between the two frequently, or, again, genderqueer, someone who is neither. People identify as, not male and not female. They have huge struggles filling out forms, government forms. I've heard stories that, people are, it's very logical because it's the way that the system is set up and it needs to be changed, but, they have to choose to put down themselves as male or female. I've heard funny stories that people try and get around it or try and make a little bit of a joke of it. They'll put down male, but then in the title they put miss or something like that. And I think that's great. They're trying to change things. But the idea of talking about gold stars, which simply reinforces opposite genders, I don't like it. It's restrictive to the gender binaries, and we need to break it down. And I think part of our role here on LGBT Allies is that we should also be the voice for those who do identify outside the gender binary, or who do identify as being transgender rather than cisgendered. And so I guess for those reasons, I am completely against the gold star, and that's all I want to say on it. See you guys.